Hi, my friends, and welcome to Master of Horror, where I bring you the most scariest stories that I've ever come by. Please like and subscribe, and if you do comment, please let me know what type of paranormal stories you would like for me to say in my next video. So please enjoy these 3 true Wendigo and horror stories with thunderstorm sounds. Now, my friend, let's begin. Scary true story number 1, The Walking Cheetah. I'm a mechanic, and in the 1960s I was about 19 years old, and I had just gotten done working late on some cars at the shop. I was really tired, and it was about 9 o'clock p.m. or so, and I can remember saying goodbye to the owner of the shop and making my way back home on the road. This location was in the Bridgewater Triangle area, which is known to be a very paranormal hotspot. I don't live in it, but I did have to drive through it every day to and from work. I remember that day that I was truly tired and I just wanted to make it home. I was driving down the highway and it was surrounded by woods on both sides. I was about 10 minutes away from home. As I was driving, I noticed that my light above my head started flickering. I really didn't pay much attention to it. I kept driving, but a couple of minutes later, my car started shaking. Then it completely stalled out. I was surprised because I've always kept up with my vehicle, especially working on cars as a career. I pulled over to the side of the road. I got out of my car with a flashlight and I made my way over to the hood of the car and I opened it. I couldn't find anything wrong with it. The engine was in great condition. I heard a noise coming from the right side of me in the woods near the side of the road. It sounded like a couple of branches breaking. I then shined my flashlight towards that direction, but I didn't see anything. I felt really vulnerable being out there alone in the pitch black. I then leaned over under the hood, shining my flashlight at the engine, trying to figure any reason of why my car would stall out. Just then, something pushed me to the ground on my back, and my flashlight rolled away from me, and I couldn't see anything. I just felt something on top of me. Whatever was on me was scratching me and was also punching me over and over again. At the same time, it was cursing at me. I remember screaming for my dear life. I reached over and I was able to grab my flashlight and started hitting the creature that was on me with the flashlight. That's when I finally got a good look at it, with the flashlight shining every so often on its face. What I saw petrifies me to this day. It was a creature with a cheetah-like face, but it had small horns and its eyes were glowing red, and it was covered in black fur, and it had claws that were covered in blood. I continued screaming and hitting the creature with the flashlight, but it didn't do anything to the creature. Just when I felt like there was no hope and I was going to die, I saw headlights coming down the highway, and it shined right on me and the creature as we were laying in the middle of the road. The creature then turned towards the lights coming down the road and jumped off of me and ran straight into the woods. I turned towards the car that was parked in the middle of the road with its light still shining on my face, and a man slowly came out of the car and walked towards me. He asked me if I was okay. I told him, did he see what was on the road that was attacking me? He said yes, that I was actually attacked by a large wolf. He said that when it ran back in the woods, it was running on its back hind legs like a human. At that point, I was petrified. I knew that what attacked me was no human or no animal. The man then gave me a ride to the police station where I filed the report, and later on that night they searched the area but found nothing. I'm now 64 years old, and I will never ever second guess my story. It really did happen to me, and I'll never forget it. Scary true story number 2. The imaginary kid. When I was about 11 years old, my dad was in the military, so we moved around a lot from place to place, and I hardly ever had the chance to make friends. We moved into a neighborhood that didn't have many kids. I would ride my bike around the block and basically would try to find something to do. One day, I was riding my bike, and there was a kid standing on the sidewalk. He looked nice, and he smiled and introduced himself as Jack. We made friends pretty quick. He pointed to the house behind him and told me that's where he lived. It looked pretty big, but it had a scary look to it, kind of like a Victorian house. The neighborhood that we were in had pretty old houses in it, but we had a pretty good house too, with my dad being in the military. My house was in a cul-de-sac area down the road from Jack's house, about 11 houses down. I started going over to his house, but he would never let me in his house. We would always play outside. After about 2 weeks, I noticed that he would never hold anything in his hands. He would always use his hands as guns. He would always hide behind trees and would act like Indians and cowboys. There were many times that I brought my toys over, and he'd be excited about it. But again, he would never pick them up. It came to a point to where I really didn't care about that. I was just happy that I had made a friend. But everything came crashing down one night. I was extremely thirsty, and I wanted a glass of water. I then asked him, is there any way he can give me something to drink from his house? And he said, I can't go inside because my parents don't want me to come inside at this time. I got really upset and told him if I could please talk to his mom myself, that I wanted a glass of water. I was pretty tired because we had played for about 3 hours. I kept asking him, but he really got upset and he told me, no, I can't. I just can't. I just remember getting really upset at him and getting on my bike and riding back to my house. And I stopped playing with him for about a week. But one day I got really bored and I got on my bike and I decided to go around the block. I saw him outside in front of his house, smiling, just like the first time I saw him. He waved me down and told me that he was really sorry for getting upset at me. I told him that it was my fault and that I was sorry. We made up. He said that there was something he wants to show me really important. I was pretty surprised, and I followed him to his backyard where he told me to follow him. And there was an axe stuck in the dirt. He pointed to it and said, look what I found. It was a really old axe. He told me to pick it up, and so I picked it up. Then he brought me to a log that was on the ground nearby. He called it a special log, and he said for me to hit it with the axe. But I told him, no, you do it. Then he got upset and told me to just hit the log with the axe. I again told him, no, why don't you do it? And he said, I just can't pick it up. So I decided to just pick up the axe and slam it down on the log. So I raised the axe in the air and I counted down from 3, 2, 1, and I hit the log that was on the ground as hard as I could. But just then, a piece of the wood from the log went into the air and went directly into my right eye. I screamed and I dropped the axe and ran towards my bike. He started laughing really loud and chased me to my bike, laughing at me. I finally knew that it was a setup, a plan to get me back for leaving him that day. I got on my bike and I started riding down the road towards my house. But the scary thing is that the whole time I was riding my bike, he was right behind me laughing, behind my ear, inches away from me. He laughed all the way down the road to my house. I turned back and he wasn't even there. It was just his voice. Blood was pouring down my right eye, and my mother rushed me to the hospital, where they had to do multiple operations to try to fix my eye. But to this day, I am still blind from my right eye. I began to realize as the days went by that it all added up, that the kid was actually a ghost. I finally realized that I was playing all those weeks with the ghost or an entity. You see, he wore the same clothes every day and never changed them. I also realized that he never grabbed or picked up anything off the ground. He never played with my toys, and he would never let me into his house or to see his parents. And on top of it all, there was no cars ever parked outside. To this day, it gives me the chills just thinking about it.
Scary true story number 3. The entity under the car. In 1990, me and my family went on a vacation to visit family in Mexico. We went shopping and spent some time with our family. It was a total of about 4 days that we were over there, and we were headed back home. We filled our tank and started our drive, but not long after filling up our tank, we then got a flat tire. We had a spare in the back, so after fixing the tire, we continued on our way back home. About an hour later, while still in Mexico, the other tire went flat. We pulled over into a tire shop that was connected to a store. My father tried turning the car back on, but it didn't want to start. My dad had a weird feeling about everything. Me and my dad got off to speak with the mechanics at the shop, but on the way up there, we noticed an old man sitting down on a bench outside the shop. The old man asked my dad what was the problem, and my dad told him that we had 2 flats, and now our car doesn't want to start. The old man said something that made my skin crawl. My dad's jaw dropped, and the hair on my arms went straight up. What the old man told us gave me nightmares to this day. He said there's a demon under your car, hanging upside down, watching us talking right now. It's looking right at you and me. My father then turned and looked under the car, and we could see a black figure hovering under the car. The old man said that the black shadow entity was following us because we brought something from Mexico that we shouldn't have. Just then, my dad remembered that he bought a hat on the side of the road from someone right before all these bad things happened. It was like a black cowboy hat. We took it to the old man and showed him the hat. The old man said someone died in that hat. My father then threw the black hat in the trash can. We got back in the car and immediately started without any problems. We then got our tire fixed and made it back home safely. I always think of this as a lesson to always pay very close attention to all the things you purchase, especially on vacation. Thank you for listening to Master of Horror, where I give you the scariest stories I've ever came by. Please check out my other videos that are guaranteed to petrify you. If you enjoyed these stories, please like and subscribe for more. Okay, my friends, until next time, have a great night. And don't forget to leave the nightlight on.
Hi, my friends, and welcome to Master of Horror, where I give you the most scariest stories that I've ever come by. These are 3 scary true skinwalker stories. Number 41. Please enjoy these stories with thunderstorm sounds. Okay, my friends, let's begin. Paranormal true story number 1. This happened when I was 15 years old, when I lived near my aunt and uncle. They lived on a farm in the middle of Washington in a small town. My grandmother and I lived in a cottage about 100 feet from the main house, and my grandma had a dog named Maggie. She's about 7 years old. I had just finished making my bed on the couch. This house was very small. Everything can be seen from the front window. I was right underneath that window. So, I finally drifted off to sleep as my family was watching a movie. I then woke up and everything was dark. But the thing was, I heard the dog walking around outside my window. I brushed it off and decided to go to the restroom. I realized there was no dog outside, and my grandma's room door was closed. The dog always sleeps with my grandma. The restroom was unfortunately on the other side of the house, in the far corner of the property. So I decided to just go ahead and use the restroom behind a tree. I didn't want to go outside alone, so I crept into my grandmother's room and grabbed the dog. As we walked out the front door, the dog ran from me, straight to the edge of the road, and just stared into the woods. I yelled for her to get back, but she wouldn't. She sat and stared into the woods. I had to go and grab her and drag her back to the house. When I reached her, I decided to look where she was looking, and I saw nothing. I quickly used the restroom and went back into the house. I put Maggie back in my grandma's room and went to sleep. It was about 3:15 in the morning. I woke up sometime later by the sound of a dog walking around outside again. So I got up and saw that my grandma's room door was open, so I thought it was Maggie. But then I looked towards the front door and it was wide open, and I froze in fear. I clearly remember locking the front door. I found the courage to look outside, so I went and walked through the open front door, and I saw a trail of red starting from the door to the road. I followed the trail into the woods, and then I saw Maggie in a tree, and I looked up. To my horror, something was holding her. It was a tall-looking man, I thought at first, but had very distorted features, and then I realized it looked like a deer head with the man's body. Terrified, I quickly ran back into the cottage, and I yelled for my family, and they ran out of the rooms, and I explained what I had seen to them. So my dad went out, and I followed him. He froze in fear right in front of me, and he turned around and ran back into the house. I chased him, and he had told me what he had seen and described the same thing as me. The next day, we packed up and left. I haven't been back ever since.
Scary, true paranormal story number 2.
A few years ago, in 2009, while I was still in high school, I was at a party with some friends in a cabin out in the woods. As the night goes on, around 2 in the morning, me and my friend Caleb decided to go outside to have a cigarette. The second we go out there, there's just this completely awful smell, like decay or something rotting. This was in the middle of nowhere, so we just figured it was a dead animal and went on having our cigarette. Less than a minute later, we hear something moving in the dark, and sure enough, a deer comes into the very edge of the porch light. But then I noticed something. One of its legs was messed up in a bad way. It looked broken in multiple places. So my friend and I are slightly put off by this and finish up our cigarettes and begin to head back inside the cabin. However, right as we start to do that, one of the 2 porch lights pop and then goes out. So now there's less light outside. The deer goes back into the darkness. A bit giddy, we both begin to laugh. We then turn around and open the back door and begin to go inside. And that's when we heard it. An undeniable sound of nails scratching on the concrete patio right behind us. We both slowly turn around and see this hunched over huge black coyote. It looked like a creature doing this very slow, unnatural crawl toward us. It has red glowing eyes. We go from 0 to 100. Paralyzed with fear, we stay stuck there just staring at this creature coming towards us until another one of our friends playfully pulls us through the open doorway, telling us to get back to the party. This guy literally saved our lives. To this day, I've never experienced anything like that, and it's one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen.
Paranormal true story number 3.
Last night, I had an experience with what I truly believe to be a skinwalker. I was sleeping on my couch because I'm in the process of remodeling my bedroom. It had been storming on and off all night, but in that moment, the wind was also blowing really hard. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning when I was awoken by a very strange noise. It sounded like an animal call, except as if a human was making a howling sound. It was a deep noise. It sounded like it was right outside my window in my backyard. In case y'all are wondering, I live in the country near the Ozark Mountains and directly on the Trail of Tears. I've lived out there in the middle of the woods my whole life. I've heard and seen everything from bears, cougars, deer, raccoons. But the sound that I heard that night wasn't like anything that I've ever heard before. I'm not gonna lie, it scared the absolute hell out of me. I immediately went to my bedroom. I have a window looking towards my backyard as well. I wanted to see whatever it was, but I didn't want to pull back my window curtains to come face to face with whatever it was. So I turned around and started walking back to the living room. Then something hit my window, as if trying to get my attention. It wasn't hard enough to break it. It sounded like someone or something threw a small rock at my bedroom window. I walked over to my window and pulled back the curtain slowly. I didn't know what I was gonna see on the other side of that window. Then once I pulled back the curtains to get a clear view, I was frozen in fear. What I saw still terrifies me to this day. It was a black shadow-like creature with antlers and white glowing eyes. It was at least 6 feet tall. It was only about 12 inches from my face, right on the other side of that window. The hairs on my arms went straight up. I quickly closed the curtain and ran to the living room, where I decided to stay the rest of the night. I prayed myself to sleep. While I was sleeping on the couch that same night, I heard another noise coming from the living room window this time. At that point, I covered my head with a blanket and forced myself to go back to sleep. Surprisingly, I was able to ignore the sounds even though I was petrified. Looking back on it, I wish I could have recorded it. I tried recording it when the noise came back the next night, but every time I took out my phone, everything stopped. Today, I built up enough courage to go into my backyard and do investigations there. Last night, I had a barbecue and went to bed around 2:30 in the morning. I heard a noise coming from the backyard, and when I went back there, I was shocked to find the barbecue pit upside down on the ground with all the ashes spread out on the ground. There was trash and broken tree limbs everywhere. It wasn't windy that night either. I did some research, and I think it's a skinwalker. I'm no stranger to these things. I've heard lots of stories about them, and considering that I've seen several things walking through the woods through my lifetime, I'm starting to become really convinced.
Thank you, my friends, for listening to Master of Horror, the channel that brings you the most scariest true paranormal stories that are out there. Please message me what type of paranormal stories you would like for me to cover on my next video. I hope you enjoyed these 3 true skinwalker stories with thunderstorm sounds. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, my friends, till next time. And don't forget to leave the nightlight on.